Back to Inside Politics. Our guest today is Nashville Congressman Jim Cooper. Congressman, a couple more foreign policy questions. President Trump prided himself to say he was going to have the kind of foreign policy to keep the foreign countries guessing. Is he also keeping the American people in Congress guessing about what's going to happen next or what the policy is?
Well, he really is keeping everybody guessing, both here at home and abroad. I hope that's part of a deliberate strategy on his part. But there are people worried that he has such a short attention span and not that good a memory that he might be vacillating for no good reason.
Let me move to a completely different topic. Quite a bit of controversy this week about the overbooking of domestic airlines, in particular one passenger on a United Airlines flight, and this was videotaped, was physically roughed up and removed for failing to give up his seat. What are your thoughts about that?
I thought it was one of the most outrageous examples of corporate cruelty that I've ever seen, to hurt an innocent doctor, somebody who's already seated on a plane who paid for a ticket. What the airline should have done is offer a high enough price so that somebody else wanted to leave the flight voluntarily. It's a market thing, and if corporations are going to live by capitalism, they should pay their passengers by capitalism.
Now, is this a role Congress needs to get involved in? There's been talk in the past about a airline passengers' Bill of Rights, and there's been one passed, but does it need to be expanded to cover this particular topic?
Well, no one reads the 56-page contract that is really every plane ticket, and airlines do have rights to bump passengers, but they should do it at market prices so it's all voluntary and so that certainly no violence is used. A previous effort at Passenger Bill of Rights didn't really succeed, and I remember Herb Kelleher, the former head of Southwest Airlines, saying you don't need a Passenger Bill of Rights if you're going to be a successful airline, because you should have cheap fares and treat your passengers right, otherwise you're going to go out of business. And United really hurt itself with what they did this last week. And
Southwest has got an ad to try to take advantage of that this week, too.
Southwest is now the largest airline in America. They do marvelous service here at Nashville Airport. They're growing like a weed because they try to treat their customers right.
Let me move back to Washington, which you fly back and forth to quite a bit over the year. You've served in the House for over a quarter century. You've represented 2 different Tennessee districts. You've been there under 5 presidents, the last 5, everyone since Ronald Reagan. What makes Donald Trump so different than the others? How has Washington changed? How's the country changed since he's been in office?
Well, Washington needs disruption. It's in need of continual reform. But at least previous disruptors, like, for example, Ronald Reagan, he had vast government experience. He'd been an actor, sure, but he'd also been governor of California, the largest state. And he was quite a student of policy, too. If you go back and look at his speeches over many, many years, he studied these things very closely. He kept notes. And this is something President Trump really just hasn't done. He was more of a playboy, more of a business guy, really didn't care about this stuff, and even today there are signs that he doesn't really care about the details.
But there are those who will say that particularly early on, all President Trump has been doing is keeping the promises that he made to the American people. And after all, Thomas Jefferson is the one that said government needs to be constantly stirred up and revolution.
Yeah, Jefferson had called for revolution every 25 years. I think he was exaggerating there because he certainly didn't mean anything like the French Revolution that happened back then. But Trump was keeping a lot of his promises. In the last couple of weeks, it's a complete reversal, a 180 almost. It's kind of amazing. We'll see if he follows through with the wall and things like that, but one by one, most of his major promises are falling by the wayside.
A lot of comparisons being made between President Trump and President Andrew Jackson. He even came here. He keeps a portrait of President Jackson in the Oval Office, but he came here and made a speech. Got quite a crowd here in blue Nashville. Does that give you any concern as an elected official in this area? I mean, they couldn't fill up the municipal auditorium quick enough to get all the people in there.
That was a campaign event when he came to the Metropolitan Auditorium. I was proud he came to the Hermitage. We always welcome sitting presidents to come to the Hermitage. I think he's the first one since LBJ to come. I love the fact he has a portrait of Andrew Jackson in his office. I've got a portrait of Andrew Jackson in my office. I'm proud of that. He was a great president. I thought Trump, when he came here, would announce that Andrew Jackson was going to stay on the $20 bill. And we need to keep asking about that, because that would have been a very easy thing for him to have announced while he was here in town.
Well, since we're talking about Tennessee presidents, let me see if you're at all interested in the controversy up on Capitol Hill here in Nashville about moving President James K. Polk and his wife's tomb from the state capitol down to Columbia. Is that anything you want to wade into?
I really could care less. My preference is to keep him where he is, because let a poor man sleep in peace.
He's been moved several times.
Well, but now, in today's generation, I think this must be more of a publicity stunt for the folks in Columbia than anything else. It's got to be expensive, and who cares? The man's dead. He's been dead for a long time. Let him sleep in peace and be honored, because, you know, he's actually the only president in American history who kept all of his major promises. And
in one term.
And he's never been honored like he should have been. We've had a lot of showy presidents, but what matters is keeping your word, and only James K. Polk did that.
Let me go back to the Russian investigation. It continues to dominate Washington. When you heard the FBI director go to Congress, congressional hearing a couple of weeks ago, and basically said the president, his staff, his campaign, and people involved in his transition are under potential criminal investigation. I haven't heard those kind of words talked about in Washington about a president of this magnitude since back in the days of Watergate. Maybe a little bit with Bill Clinton, but nothing on that scale.
This is the most serious thing since Watergate, and we don't know the end of it yet. Nobody should jump to conclusions, but nobody should want a foreign power to mess with U.S. elections. And it's not just hindsight. They're about to be European elections, and the country of France, England, Germany could all be upended by this Russian influence. Right now, Marine Le Pen, one of the leading candidates in France, 1/3 of her campaign money comes from Russia. That is outrageous. And we've got to make sure this Russian influence, whether it's cyber or whether it's money, doesn't upend things.
But did the Russian influence, whatever it was, somehow make the difference for Donald Trump to be elected? I mean, nobody made people go vote for Donald Trump because of that, right?
Well, it may not have made a difference, but really we don't know the answer to that because we don't know all the ways they influence things. Propaganda can be very subtle, and in today's era of fake news, my grandmother used to say you might as well kill a dog as give him a bad name. If you kill a politician by giving him a bad name, that can be devastatingly effective.
But it's an interesting situation. The Democrats were very mad with the FBI director back during the election because at least twice he came out and made statements about Hillary Clinton, about the investigation of her that everybody thought was definitely going to hurt the campaign. Now he seems to be saying it's time to investigate Donald Trump, and we have been. In fact, he was investigating him in the summer of the campaign back from July. But it's kind of hard to be for him now when you were against him before, right?
Well, I'm not talking about Comey himself. You can judge him. History will judge him. And probably he should have been quieter all along, like most FBI directors. You didn't hear Louis Freeh talk a whole lot. J. Edgar Hoover didn't talk a whole lot, and he did some bad things. But in today's media age, the media kind of demands that they make statements and people want to know, but we should never compromise an investigation.
So the media made him do it.
Well, there's a lot of pressure to be forthcoming, and in general, transparency is good, but grand jury investigations, criminal prosecutions, you need a little space there so that you can get to justice.
Congressman Jim Cooper is our guest on Inside Politics. Back to continue what's going on, to talk about more about what's going on in Washington after you watch these messages.